BMW has really come good with the M240i, a cracker of a performance coupe that packs a 374 horsepower punch, looks the part and gains xDrive four-wheel drive in this smarter second generation form. With this one, the game just changed for the better.
If you see yourself as a bit of a car enthusiast, BMW's M240i badge might mean something to you. In 2014, when the brand's F22 Generation 2 Series Coupe was first introduced, the hot six-cylinder version was the M235i, which was the fastest model in the range until the M2 arrived in 2015. But that car was a big step up in price, if not in power. A better stepping stone to it was needed, hence the M235i model's upgrade to M240i status in 2017. Enough with the history. Fast forward to 2022 and the launch of the G42 second generation 2 Series Coupe. Again, there's still a delay with the introduction of an M2 version, which means that the stepping stone model comes to the fore. Still badged M240i, but now with an xDrive four-wheel drive system, so you can enjoy all of that six-cylinder power rush just that little bit more. Power output is taking a big step forward here over the previous generation version, up to 374 horsepower, which is just as well because curb weight is up too by a rather chunky 205 kilos. That's mainly because xDrive four-wheel drive is now a non-negotiable part of this model's rather addictive recipe. If you're one of those people who remember heart palpitations on damp corners in the previous six-cylinder 2 Series Coupe, you'd be inclined to take the hit on that, and sure enough, this G42 model feels immeasurably better rooted to the tarmac. The instant the rear slip's detected, the electronically controlled multi-plate clutch pack simply pushes drive forwards, which gives you much more confidence to press on, even in the kind of less clement conditions which, with the previous F22 series design, might have left you tempted to leave the car in the garage. And press on this M240i certainly does. The straight six flares with 500 newton meters of torque, and the 62 miles an hour sprint is dispatched in just 4.3 seconds en route to a governed top speed of 155 miles an hour. Those are stats which are basically the same as those which were offered by the old F87 series M2 at its original launch back in 2015. At the time of filming, the replacement for that car was in final testing, but from the same 3-litre lump, we expect another 70 horsepower, along with the enthusiast-orientated options of manual transmission and rear-wheel drive. For most people, most of the time though, an M240i would be just as fast and pretty much as involving, provided you specify it properly. An M Sport rear differential is standard fit on this Junior M variant. It maximises traction and works with the DSC system to transfer torque between the two rear wheels as you turn. Now, unfortunately, the M adaptive suspension package that you're going to want on this car still isn't standard. Without that, you're limited to the same rather stiff passive M Sport suspension setup, which has now been standardised across the 2 Series Coupe range. With this, the springing isn't quite as uber firm as it was with the previous generation car, but it will still acquaint you quite personally with most of the tarmac tears that you'll encounter on your daily commute. So the outlay of an extra £500 on the optional adaptive system available for this M240i would, we suggest, be money very well spent. As you expect in a BMW, it works through the car's various drive performance control driving modes, adding in an extra adaptive option which makes all the decisions for you and can take into account GPS data so that the gearbox, for example, doesn't change up during a series of twisting turns. Across the range, the standard drive setting options are still those of older generation BMW designs, Eco Pro, Comfort and Sport, the latter embellished here by an even more focused Sport Plus option and customizable with individual menu options for your choice of steering, engine and transmission settings. Now there are damping options too if you're in an M240i with M adaptive suspension fitted. Opt for the transmission section's sharpest Sport Plus option and you'll get really rapid fire changes from the 8-speed Steptronic auto gearbox that, as we mentioned earlier on, all mainstream 2 Series Coupe models now have to have. There are well-sided paddle shifters with it, which is good, and they're fashioned from cheap-feeling grainy plastic, which isn't. For our market, the sport version of the ZF box has been standardised across the range, and that means that every model comes with launch control for Grand Prix getaways and a natty sprint function, which is activated when you pull the left-hand change paddle back for at least a second. This automatically shifts the car into the lowest usable gear, and it switches all of the powertrain and chassis systems to their sharpest settings. The sharpest setting delivered for steering is one that, as you'd expect, adds weight to the rack. Unfortunately, it doesn't add all of the really immersive feel that we were hoping for, though. The UK importers have standardised BMW's variable sport steering across the range. That's a setup that feels good on a bigger 4 Series Coupe if your rather modest point of comparison lies with coupe versions of the Mercedes C-Class and the Audi A5. On this two-door 2 Series, though, you'd hope for something approaching the kind of communication that you get at the helm of a Cayman or a Toyota GR86. And here the car's electrified rack rather falls short. We can only hope that it's not carried forward into the M2. There's really not much else to complain about here, though, and much about the improvements to this car that we really like. The solid stopping feel that you get from the lightweight braking system, particularly in the uprated M Sport form that we're trying here. The new option of a head-up display, and the way that this car is now almost as good as a 4 Series Coupe over longer distances, thanks to greater refinement, and the option of assisted drive tech features like active cruise control. As a result, this car is almost a miniature Grand Tourer, but it's no cruisy GT. Choose a larger two-door BMW if you want that. It is recognisably a 2 Series Coupe, but this time a slightly larger and certainly more modern looking one. There's no convertible body style option this time around, and the coupe we're left with is now a meaner, more aggressive looking thing. You wouldn't call it pretty, but equally you wouldn't mistake it for anything else. Defiantly niche is the phrase BMW uses. The profile is pleasingly familiar. The classic 3-box body with its long bonnet and short overhangs is a welcome change from the swept-back coupes and boxy hot hatches that this car competes against. Let's move to the front, where overtaking presence is on a different level this time around. Three-dimensional surfaces, triangular forms and diagonal lines are now integral to this design. Interestingly, the controversial new upright grille design from the 4 Series models hasn't been adopted here. Instead, this more traditional horizontal kidney grille combines with the low-reaching front apron to give the car a wider and more low-slung look. The rear is just as divisive. Peculiarly small, darkened LED taillights are positioned at each corner. BMW says they embody sporting prowess in a concentrated form. Whatever your perspective on that, there's a real sense of purpose here with attitude, emphasised by this diffuser-like central apron insert, which extends a long way up and is flanked by twin tailpipes on the petrol models, circular on the 220i and trapezoidal on this M240i variant. Time to take a look inside. At the wheel here, you certainly now feel like you're in a more sophisticated and upmarket car, and in some ways you are, because compared to a 4 Series model, the cabin architecture is almost identical. Only the door cards are actually bespoke to this design. Not that you'd really care, because there's more of an executive vibe than is usually offered by a small BM, with the high centered console creating a cocooning feel around both front seat occupants, which is totally appropriate to the kind of car this is. The shrunken CLAR platform that this G42 model is now based on can't support the cutting-edge media tech that you'll find in the Munich maker's other more recent small models, but the standardised live cockpit professional package that you get here will still seem like quite a step up for customers graduating on from the previous F22 series design. A 12.3-inch monitor replaces the previous model's analog dials in the instrument cluster, and a bigger 10.25-inch centre dash iDrive infotainment display is now much better integrated into the centre of the fascia. What else might you need to know? Maybe that the redesigned sports seats are much improved, and an optional head-up display is new to this model line. Your over-the-shoulder view, that is as slightly restricted as it always is on a coupe, but there's a whole bank of extra tech to help you slot into spaces. And plenty of storage room too in the now more spacious cabin. Time to take a look in the rear. Well, once inside, there's far more room than you'd have any right to expect from anything calling itself a coupe. Well, a two-door one anyway. And it's worth pointing out that the two potential rivals to this top M240i variant, the Porsche 718 Cayman and the Alpine A110, don't offer rear seats at all. Headroom here would obviously be better if the ceiling height was the same as it is in the front, but even so, most adults will fit in fine, and there's room for your elbows thanks to these scalloped out side panels. BMW obviously thinks that real people are going to regularly sit back here, because it's rather curiously standardised 3-zone climate control across the range, and that means that you get these digital temperature gauges here between the twin central vents. Finally, let's take a look in the boot. BMW hasn't bothered with pointless electrical operation for this lid, and it rises to reveal a 390 litre capacity, which is the same as that of the previous generation model. Instead of the ski hatch, which was provided on the previous generation model, there's now a more flexible 40-20-40 split for the rear backrest, so long items like skis can be pushed forward into the cabin between a couple of rear-seated occupants. Lots of ways then that you can practically justify what is essentially a deliciously selfish sports car. If you're looking at this M240i xDrive variant, it's worth pointing out that the same sort of money would buy you Porsche's mid-engine 718 Cayman Coupe, although that has only 300 PS, so it's just under a second slower to 62. You'd need to spend £57,000 on a 718 Cayman S to match an M240i's performance precisely. And even then, you'd have to do without the traction of four-wheel drive. So in damp conditions, the Porsche wouldn't see which way the BMW went. A particular kind of customer might also consider the hairy-chested Ford Mustang Fastback V8, which costs from around £50,000 and puts out 450 PS. But really, that car in many ways is the very opposite of everything that a BMW stands for. An Alpine A110 is closer, but a £50,000 budget only gets you that car with 252 horsepower, and it's in no way day-to-day usable in a way that this 2 Series can be. For this desirable M240i xDrive model, there are of course a few extra nice-to-have details, namely larger 19-inch wheels with BMW's 792 cerium grey style design, with more cerium grey used for the exhaust tailpipe finishes, the front bumper air inlet embellishers, the front grille frame, the mirror caps and the badging. There's also sun protection glass, M Sport brakes with evocative red calipers, and BMW's M Sport differential for extra fast cornering traction. Inside, with an M240i, you get full Vanaska leather upholstery, plus powered front M Sport seats with memory settings, lumbar support and M belts. Paying for your pleasures here, fortunately, isn't too onerous. The best possible 34.4 miles per gallon combined cycle fuel figure is basically the same as you'll get from a featherlight rival Alpine A110. You might find the tax implications of the 200 gram per kilometre CO2 figure a bit more painful though. The only way around that with the 2 Series Coupe of this performance potential is to wait until the brand launches the all-electric iM2 version of this model, but that will require a healthy slice of your bank balance. We don't think this is too bold a prediction, but this second generation BMW M240i looks set to become one of the most well-regarded BMW sporting models of recent times. Put simply, it barely puts a foot wrong. The price is right, it's crushingly quick, it's reasonably efficient, and it looks, well, it's good looking enough that you won't need to make apologies for it when it's standing on your driveway. Most importantly though, BMW has managed to combine those talents and pitch the car right into a sweet spot in the market where few key direct rivals exist. If you felt that the BMW M3 and latterly the M4 had become just too powerful and expensive to be of any real relevance, then you're going to adore the M240i. If you gave any BMW fan a wish list and asked them to build the perfect car, given the company's current resources, it probably wouldn't be too far off this one. Maybe a few grand cheaper, but hey, you can't have everything. Even as it stands, this is the performance coupe that many prospective BMW M2 competition customers should really choose, but probably won't. You now know better.